tuning in to another episode of the New ID podcast. I am your host, Kuda Mic, and I'm joined here tonight by James Abraham, CEO of MindRight, as part of our nuMind series, where we discuss all things mental health. How are you doing today, James?
I'm very well, my friend. I'm very well. How about you?
I am good, man. Much better day today, and I'm excited to discuss today's topic. So we're gonna get right into it. It's a great one with some other things embedded in there. I'm not going to spoil too much. Let's get right into talking about ethnic couples in Western societies.
Yeah, cool. That's it's something I'm particularly passionate about because I think relationships are more complex today. What direction we take in this?
You make a good point because we both have lived experience. But I think let's start with maybe the challenges they face in ethnic couples. And if you have any insight on challenges faced particularly by interracial couples in Western societies, what can you share? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think before you're right. We all have very lived experiences with this, and that sometimes takes away the objectivity of something. So I think maybe we start with something like data, and I like to start with data because it gives us a good platform. And I did obviously do some research before jumping into this thing. So there was a recent study that showed that approximately 55% of marriages today are arranged marriages. Now, 55%, yeah. And that's because a lot of people in today's culture, of course, yeah, we can safely assume a lot of that is in the Asian culture, right? But that's generally frowned upon in Western culture, arranged marriages, because of the association that arranged marriages are generally, even till today, with girls under the age of 18. So very common in sub-Saharan Africa, in large parts of India and China, as well as Bangladesh, that brides even till today are under the age of 18. I mean, that's why there is a very negative association with arranged marriages. But you'd be surprised to find out that arranged marriages have a significantly lower divorce rate than love marriages.
What do you think that is? Is there data on what that might be what might be the cause of that?
There is a lot of variables that influence that. But one of the key metrics that they noted was that in an arranged marriage, family is involved.
Oh.
Because it's the combination of two families coming together. Now, they found that in arranged marriages, there were a lot more family support. There was a better support system embedded into it just by the structure of an arranged marriage.
Right.
So those marriages tend to last because there was a support system. Now, I say that with the caveat that just because something lasts doesn't mean that the people in that relationship are satisfied. Yeah. Now, satisfaction scores were a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, arranged marriages scored higher in satisfaction scores than love marriages, right?
Wow, I would not have expected that.
No, or I was just as surprised. But I also think culturally some of the culture may have been speaking through those answers, because a lot of arranged marriages, and we spoke about this last week with men's mental health, there are gender assigned roles in families. Right. And so there is an acceptance that the man will dictate terms, the woman keeps the family together, that sort of thing. So that could also be influencing that data. And so I wanted to preface our conversation with that kind of data, because a lot of people, when we talk about ethnic relationships coming into Western culture, it's the ethnic culture also coming.
True that.
And we're in Western culture, there is more liberty, there is more women's independence, there is more rights, equal rights, and all of those things. And that's not we don't get equal
That's not
rights
usually the
necessarily.
case in many migrant countries, I guess, or where they originate from.
Yeah,
Is what
yeah.
you're saying, yeah.
So that's why I wanted to preface this conversation by just giving a nice foundation to why there is a difference and how much culture influences that difference, because you're raised in something, that's all you know, and then you come somewhere else and suddenly they're like, you can only imagine what it might be for women who are influenced by Western television in their home countries, but they don't have the ability to practice those things, and then they come to a Western country for the first time. They're like, oh my God, how do I, you're a fish out of water for the first time.
Right.
How do you assimilate to this? Right. And where is that line where you forget your culture, or which is the parts that you need to forget so that you can progress as a culture? And so I wanted to preface that.
I like that. That's really important to bring to the conversation, because as you were describing or kind of laying that foundation, you had me thinking about, interesting. How is my relationship? How would that be in Zimbabwe or in South Africa? What would that be like? And there's some dynamics right off the bat you can think of that would be different. And to your point, everyone is just learning. Like, so when the couple comes over here, there's liberties that women in Western societies have, or it's liberating rather to some extent. And that's a new experience. And then cool, maybe the man who has had the, I guess, a different role back home, come into this new experience and have to navigate that, which is where some of last week's topics come into play, because men's mental health around that is like, what is reality anymore? What is life? It feels so different. What am I doing? What do I need to impart on the next generation? And all of that then factors in. So people are learning. So I love that you laid that foundation, because to your point, I often try and ensure that I give someone the grace of, you only know what you know. If you were raised in even the worst with the worst behaviors or habits or whatever, but that's all you know. That's all you know.
Yeah.
Now let's start to educate. How open are you to education or to learning something new? That's a different story. But damn, if that's what you knew, that's what you knew.
And you say something really. You used a really interesting word there. You said reality. And I think sometimes people, especially in today's world, what is reality? Reality is however you perceive it to be. Reality isn't necessarily what is actually outside. And we see how easily reality gets skewed, because it's our perception of reality that is reality. And sometimes, as you said, right, you only know what you know, and a lot of things you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know how to ask questions because you don't know you were supposed to ask questions. That's right? Yeah. So it does create a very difficult situation, because you can imagine, right? If it was just yourself coming into a new country, if you remember the first time you came to, I don't know if you can remember the first time you came to Australia.
100%.
And what that experience was like, and you have to navigate that just to find the balance within yourself. Like when I moved to Australia and I lived there for a couple of years, the first time I came, I remember like, now when I'm back in Singapore many years later, a little bit more mature, hopefully, and I reflect on my time there, I'd like recognize how much outside of my depth I was, because the culture is so different to what I'm used to. And I only give you that example because that's just one person.
Sure.
A relationship does not have just one person. A relationship has at least two people.
Yeah.
And so imagine trying to navigate those changes for yourself, but also for your relationship. And that's where all of this, the challenges really come from, because you are trying to navigate yourself and the changes that you're experiencing. But now your relationship is also being impacted simultaneously.
Right.
So, to give you a visual, you're fighting two battles at the same time, right? And there's a third silent battle, like an unspoken battle, because you don't know how to talk about it. So while you're fighting this battle of yourself, coming into a new culture, the relationship is fighting its own battle, fitting into this new culture. And then there's a quiet third battle of how much about this can I talk about without looking silly? Because you're probably coming from a culture where mental health isn't largely talked about.
True.
So you see this even in your new culture, but you're like, yeah, but I'm an outsider. Can I talk about this? How will my people look at me?
True.
And so that's where a lot of this gets very, very difficult. And especially with relationships, when they first enter this new culture, they are supposed to straight away get it because the pace of the world is so fast.
That's right.
You're supposed to know. And the very, very difficult reality of it is you're not going to, because it's different and you haven't given yourself that bedding in time. You know, like when you get to a new job, you got 3 months probation. You're supposed to learn the ropes. Nobody's going to try and put your targets up too aggressively. They're like, no, just settle in.
Yeah.
Right? Let's not rush you into it. You don't get that with relationships.
No probation period when you move over. Yeah.
You hit the ground running, right?
Yeah.
You got to figure out your kids' school if you've got kids. You got to figure out your job.
Parents, man, that's an extra layer. Like you said, there's the two dynamics and then the unspoken one. Imagine that extra layer. And I wanted to give parents a shout out because they make that sacrifice of leaving home to go for better opportunities for the future or for the family going forward. And that then you're thinking, or maybe not thinking enough about what are the kids going to experience. But that can't be easy.
No.
No.
It is. I mean, like I remember when my parents wanted to migrate, right? When I was much younger, and I thought they were the most horrible parents on the planet. It's like, how could you do this? Take me away from my friends? Like, you don't care about me. You're just selfish people right now.
Right?
And
so selfish.
Selfish. But when I look back on it, like I'm like, they were actually making a far greater sacrifice.
Yeah.
I mean, we were unsuccessful, but they were making a far greater sacrifice because they had to do all the paperwork and the administration. And, the internet wasn't the way the internet is today, back, compared to how it was back then. So they were trying to give us a better life, right? Yeah. And we didn't. And I was very happy, I remember at the time. But then when I moved to Australia, as difficult as the culture was, I saw how much opportunity it was. And I also realized, like, because we're on the topic of relationships, I also realized and you can stop me if I'm wrong, I didn't find relationships as divisive there. Right. Whoa, what just happened?
You made an amazing point, and somehow fireworks.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I just saw my screen. And no, so I over here, like in my relationships, I've had a relationship before where I dated a girl from I'm Indian and she's Chinese, and I had her parents come to my house, her dad come to my house and threaten me because he didn't want his daughter dating an Indian boy, and he had a henchman and they were threatening to beat me up and everything. I had her mother turn up at a restaurant and spit on the table because she was disgusted that her daughter was seen in public with somebody like me. So,
is that quite common, would you say, in your whole country?
During the pandemic, there were a lot of, not a lot, there were instances where people very openly were disgusted that interracial couples existed.
Right.
Yeah. So it is look, Singapore is a conservative country at the end of the day. So if those things exist, you don't hear it as often.
Right.
I think there is a growing acceptance of it.
Right.
But I never faced something like that when I was in Australia. I dated Caucasian Australians, or dated girls outside of my own race, and I'd never faced anything like what I faced over here.
Yeah. Same for me, man. Like, obviously being like Zimbabwean and Lisa being colored South African, it's a conversation we have all the time. Hey, do you feel like there's anyone looking at us the wrong kind of way, or any of that? And I acknowledge that I'm so much like a positive, like optimistic person. Like I don't even think I would see it. You know what I mean? But there are times where I'm like, a lot more people are looking at us. And I know you look good, but that's not it. You know what I mean? Like you can tell that there's some sort of questioning, but it's interesting you bring that up because there has been a lot less, as far as I can tell here, than you would have that discussion back home. But then there's so many layers to that I'd love to explore. And I don't know, maybe let's go into. I wanted to ask for what advice you'd have, maybe going back to the challenges faced when you're understanding that you're facing that individual battle, because the battle Lisa's facing is entirely different to my one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's interesting to hear her experiences sometimes. And I'm like, man, I can't believe they put you through that. Then I'm like, oh yeah, actually fair. Yeah, they be doing that sometimes. And it happens to me. They just water off a duck's back. And maybe that is not the right approach. Anyway, what would you say is advice on how to maybe start conversing about it as a first point of call?
I think it's you said something actually there. You said there's your problem and there's Lisa's problem. But Lisa's problem, like your partner's problem, can never be your problem.
Right.
Because they have to find a way to navigate through that. And you're right. Like for me, when I get racist remarks now, it's water off a duck's back. It's very okay. You're someone who's not as informed as you should be, maybe. Right. And I don't care about it. I generally just let it go. Like I get it still till today. I've seen an old Chinese lady, just not want to take the same lift as me. She'd walk a flight of stairs to another floor before she takes the same lift as me. Right.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't know if you should be taking stairs. It looks dangerous, but she'd risk that than take the same lift. And just to contextualize, I'm like dressed well, I smell good and everything. So I'm just going out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's not like I've just had a run or whatever. But it's when I get it, it just gets annoying. Right. And then you move past it. So when we're faced with those types of challenges, the best thing that we can do is talk about it.
Okay.
Because a lot of this will stem from a lack of understanding. Like, my wife has a saying, she says, kill them with kindness. And that's a saying I gave her, and then she gives it back to me now. Because
I love that.
yeah, so I gave it to her because my boss from many years ago gave that to me, and I've told her that, and now she throws it back to me every chance she gets. And I'm like, oh, that's a good point. I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that's my point. But it's where she's super nice to people, no matter how, because she's really fair. And so a question that she often gets is what are you? Because she's got frizzy hair. So sometimes they think she's black or she's South American or but she's Indian. But she doesn't get that. And there's many times where when people are a little bit more racist, to quote Michelle Obama, you take the high road when they take the low road. Yeah. Right. And so the way my wife does it is she just tries to be as nice and polite as she can, because sometimes those people who are coming at you with those things just don't understand well enough.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so the best thing you can do is just try and break the chain of events, right? Just break that cycle. Yeah. So because they've been introduced to like, oh, this ethnic group was always very dirty or always very smelly or whatever. The best thing you can do is always very mean or rude or drunk.
Aggressive or
So the best thing you can do is break that chain of thought, right? Give them a different reason to go like, oh, well, these are different. These are different people. But those little microaggressions impact the relationship when you don't talk about it. So that's one of the biggest challenges for marriages from ethnic communities when they come into the Western world, because the Western world as open and as liberal as they're supposed to be, struggle with adapting to these different ethnic groups.
Right.
And so the majority it's really about how easily can the majority accept the new minorities.
Right.
And if they can, the assimilation is a lot easier. That we celebrate each other's differences. We learn more about each other's cultures.
Yeah.
And then if we're not, you clash. You're always going to clash.
Right.
So yeah, talking about it is probably the first step to navigating some of these challenges.
You talked about something really interesting there that makes me feel encouraged, I guess, to keep being my positive self. And look, it's not like I need any excuse to keep being good vibes or positive or whatever, but I had started questioning, should I do any more than the mindset of, I'll be the example you do have, that we can be nice and we can be like really friendly and we can be all this. And I know the conversation in a lot of spaces is, well, we shouldn't have to. And I'm like, I get it. I know we shouldn't have to, but I'm going to do my part to make sure that the next person they interact with, they're like, but they can be nice. You know what I mean? But as annoying as that might seem, I'm like, look, we got to leave this world in a better place than we found it, or we can sit around and complain about how unfair it is and do nothing. So I'm glad you touched on that. Kill them with kindness.
Kill them with kindness. Kill them with kindness.
And look, I've definitely heard that before, but I love that we've had this as part of the conversation, because it's a good way to just, it's a good peace of mind for yourself as well. Keeps your mind and soul light, because you're not harboring that negative, I'll show them that.
Yeah. You're spot on, Mac, because when you keep all of that stuff inside, it destroys your body. It weakens your immune system. It increases your stress level, which in turn, makes you gain weight or makes you lose weight at an unhealthy rate. You overstress the heart, the liver. Those are the kidneys. Those are things that, again, it'll go back to the same topic of stress.
Yeah.
All of these little stresses, they begin to add. So talking about it, with a mental health professional, if you feel like nobody in your family might understand, is really useful. Not because you can get advice. I promise you have the answers inside of you. It's just you don't know which one is the answer, which one is the problem, how to circumnavigate these whole things. And so having a mental health professional or a coach just to talk you through your own emotions, just to unravel each layer bit by bit, so that you can better understand what is it about this person saying that is bothering me.
Right.
And when you're able to figure that out, I promise the relationship blossoms as well, because then you can bring this back to the relationship and go, hey, this is what happened, but this is what I've understood from it.
Yeah.
Right. And this is why I'm bothered by it. And when you're able to tackle that for yourself and you bring that into the relationship and you communicate that piece, the relationship begins to grow as well. Because now you realize, oh, okay, wait, maybe the xenophobia stems from a place of a lack of understanding. So how about we let them understand a little bit more? So for Hindus in Singapore, there was a period, especially during the pandemic, where there was a large amount of xenophobia. But what I saw from some really cool people was that, let me introduce more of the Hindu culture. So Holi, or Thaipusam, and all of these other festivals, and they talk a little bit more about it, because these are really really nice, cool festivals.
Yes, sir.
Right. And so when you get to understand the culture a little bit more, you're like, wow, hey, can I be a part of that? Because it sounds fun.
Yeah.
Or how can I go and observe? Or you know what I mean? So expanding the conversation. Like right now we're in Ramadan for the Muslims, right? And so they're fasting. I think it's until this Wednesday. And they would have been fasting for, I think, 40 days. Don't quote me, something like that. And they fast when the sun, they start their fast as soon as the sun rises, and they go all the way till the sun sets. But understanding that culture a little bit more, and I see that a lot in sports today, where if in the middle of a televised match, the sun sets in the middle of the game, the referee blows for a quick stoppage so that the Muslim players can break their fast, right? And like I support a football club called Liverpool Football Club over in the English Premier League, and then the data actually showed that there was so much less hate against Muslims because the star player for Liverpool was Mohamed Salah.
Yeah.
Right? And because they liked that player and that player was bringing glory to the club, they learned more about it, which only furthers the point that the more you understand something, the less afraid you are of it.
I like that. I want to wrap that in a bow by just saying I'm glad you brought it back to relationships, because you just highlight something we discussed on the last episode, which is every individual is responsible to for doing their own work on themselves. So even in a relationship, like you said, my problems are my own and wifey's problems are her own. However, the more we work on those individually, the better we are for each other. So nice little bow on that. And it's a shame you support Liverpool. I'm a Man United fan, and I don't do the banter. My team sucks right now. And if you're watching this in 5 years when we're back on top, but I don't know if you can hear the production man in the background talking about the Gunners. Anyway, let me not ruin what has been a beautiful conversation.
Yeah.
Not yet, anyway.
Bringing weak teams into this conversation.
I'm so glad you use that reference. I live in the sports world, and hearing that the Dallas Mavericks were very supportive of Kyrie with breaking his fast, like you say, it's just really about taking ownership of the fact that I want people to learn more. So do I sit around and complain about why they're not learning more, or do I play my part? Like you said, if I'm the star of Liverpool and I'm doing my thing and I'm someone's idol, and that opens them up to that, great. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's beautiful. Well said. As always, really incredible points. I think this might be the perfect place to cap the conversation, because we've touched on ethnic relationships. Or is there something you want to add?
That with ethnic relationships, the other challenge as well is the dynamic within the relationship must change, because you're not in that culture anymore.
Yeah.
And then you come into a new culture. There's, and we touched on this very briefly earlier, where there's so much more liberties and so different, right? When you come from a very sort of fixed way where women stay in the house, for example, men go out, and those very gender assigned roles, right, within the family and within outside of the family, and then when you come into a very Western culture where those roles don't exist, or we're trying to be more free with liberties, and there's so much that I don't think we have the time to really dig into, like religion and the role religion plays in influencing how a person, how a couple settles down in Western culture. Your race, of course, we've touched quite a bit on how race influences, but I just wanted to, I'd be remiss if I don't talk about the fact that when these couples from an ethnic background, they move into a Western culture, it can be really, really hard to settle into that, because those individual battles supersede the necessary components for a relationship to blossom. And when your individual battles become so big, and then you don't get help because you're not used to the mental health component of it, you don't think that's a real thing, because you're used to coming from a culture that says there's nothing. Mental health is not a real thing. What are you, stressed?
Yeah.
Go eat and you'll be less stressed, you know? But there's so much about this, right? Like just because I said food, we all come from a culture where you clean every grain of rice from your plate. You 100%. Leave nothing, right?
No, we don't waste around here.
Yeah. But what happens when your portion size increases and then obesity kicks in, and you're fighting the cultural, the imprint within you to go finish every grain.
Oh, yeah.
And then the sort of societal difference is, no, eat what you can, don't finish everything because you don't want to overeat. And that's a really easy example that I want to lay out, because that example in relationships as well happen, right? Where a guy's like, I want to give you, like, in some cultures, it's okay for the man to hit the woman. It's okay for parents to hit their children, discipline. When in a lot of Western cultures, that's not okay.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
A man cannot hit a woman to exert dominance, and a parent is not allowed to hit their children. Right? And when they come into this Western culture, they're still trying to navigate, like, how do I do this now?
Yeah.
And because they don't have the tools to figure themselves out and then figure out the parenting, and look at how many layers are just coming through, and how many challenges. It compounds on each other. It's not each individual, it's a compounding problem that begins to feel like a weight you can't carry.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole thing starts breaking apart. And that's why, like, the moving over here was a bad idea. But it's not the moving that's the problem. You may have come from a war-torn place, or you may have come from a culture where you feel like you weren't getting enough, and now this one you feel a little bit more at home.
Yeah.
All of those opportunities that present itself becomes that much harder to get through because of these compounding issues that you don't realize are easy to navigate through, because all you needed to do was talk to someone.
Yeah.
Like, literally, the key to a lot of this stuff is talking to someone so that you can get it off your chest. It's very cathartic, getting something off your chest. And as soon as you get that weight off your chest, you create the space to find solutions now to your problems, to figure out ways to navigate difficulties and challenges. And it all begins with talking about it.
Yes, sir. Beautifully capped. I'm not going to add anything to that at all. Thank you for adding that. And I look forward to our next conversation. It's been a pleasure. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the New ID podcast. I have been your host, Kuda Mic, joined tonight by James Abraham, CEO of MindRight, discussing all things mental health. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the New ID podcast, where we tell stories from the community. We can't do any of this without your support, and we can't thank you enough. But to help us grow, please like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Tune in next time for another incredible story from the community.